Broadcasting live from the Subaru of Gwinnett Studios in Atlanta, it's time for On the Money, presented by Embassy National Bank. Now, here's your host, Joe Moss.
Welcome to this week's edition of On the Money. We are the #1 small business show on Business Radio X. And I found out last week we actually have an international audience too. The show is presented by Embassy National Bank. Embassy National Bank is a nationally chartered financial institution, and our deposits are insured by the FDIC. On this show, we discuss topics designed to help small business succeed, because at Embassy National Bank, we are proud of how we help small business. I'm Joe Moss, your host and the president at Embassy National Bank, and we welcome all of you to the Subaru of Gwinnett studio. So we got a interesting show today because we're going to interview Rick Higgins, who is the owner of Team Logic IT, which is a IT company here in Gwinnett County, but he's focused all over Atlanta. But he had has a different story of how he landed in this, and so we're going to talk about his company and some of the issues surrounding IT, and then we're going to move to this other part of the story. So, Rick, welcome today.
Thank you, Joe. Glad to be here.
And so tell us about Team Logic IT.
Team Logic IT is a franchise company that's been around for 11 years now. We've grown to 100 outlets nationwide, and we have 4 here in Metro Atlanta, and I'm the most recent one here.
And what does Team Logic focus on?
Primarily managed services for the IT component of any small to medium-sized company, and that's where we focus, the SMB market.
Okay, and when you say managed, give me an idea of what that is.
Well, we like to come in, the traditional way in which companies engage IT vendors is on what we call break fix. Something's broken, computers broke, people made a mistake, they call us in to fix it. Problem is, you sit around and wait for the phone to ring, and you're hoping that a computer breaks, and you go in and take care of it. Managed services puts the IT industry or the IT vendor on the same side of the table as the customer, in which the interests are the same. We have the same vested interest, and that is that your computers are highly available and easy to use, and you've always got them.
So someone who has got, say, a CPA practice, a law practice, highly dependent on their technology, you'll come in and redesign that whole platform for them and then manage it for them?
If necessary, and we would call that a remediation project. But generally what we do is we'll come in and we tend to price our projects out on a per employee basis as opposed to on an hourly contract basis. So that level sets your expectation of what you're going to spend on a month-to-month or even an annual basis. And if necessary, we will do a reconfiguration. And sometimes there is project work associated with what we do.
And when you do a reconfiguration, well, the first level is just come in on a per employee basis. That's the way you charge, and you just manage what they have.
That's right.
Okay.
Now, we'll do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week remote monitoring of all systems, so we can't get out in front of any problems that may be coming down the line. And we do backup disaster recovery. It's fully managed, happens overnight if need be.
Do you run their software as well, or do you just go ahead and let them do that?
Typically, when you talk about software, you're talking about line of business applications. Could be something as small or benign as QuickBooks,
sure,
accounting software, or something much more complex that's running a real complex database. Generally, our side of the industry, or IT in general, stays on the hardware side. There is software associated with that hardware, and that's the software that we maintain and monitor.
What about email servers and things like that?
Yes, email, server, yes, absolutely.
That's all managed by you guys,
yes,
but
sir.
Owned by the client.
Right.
Okay.
Or subscribed by the client. It may be a subscription-based application.
Okay. Okay. But you'll manage that for them,
yes,
with
sir.
somebody.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So tell me, when did you buy the franchise?
Bought the franchise in November of last year.
Okay.
Opened up the doors December 15th. Turns out those last 2 weeks of the year are kind of a bust. So
sure,
for all practical purposes, January 1st was when we opened.
Okay. And what have you experienced so far?
So far, it's been really good. Our platform has been really well received in Metro Atlanta. And again, being the fourth guy here, there was already exposure for Team Logic, so I was able to benefit from that.
Now, when you say your platform, what do you mean by your platform?
The name, the brand, Team Logic IT, and managed services in general, because it is a sea change in the industry, changing from the break fix that I described a little bit earlier to the managed services platform.
So when you're called in and asked to propose or talk about what you do, and you see an IT environment that you really don't want to have to manage, is that when you recommend the remediation?
Yes, sir. And we see a lot of that out there. We're seeing a lot of XP operating systems, which has been way past end of life. And we identify that on the front end, and so we don't have any surprises once we're on board. We say, look, this is what an onboarding is going to look like. This part is our standard onboarding. This part is our remediation work that you really need to do. And this is going to be your level set managed services cost over time.
So, I guess I hate using the word typical, so I won't use that. But when you go into a small business, how often do you see a fairly reasonably shaped or designed systems network?
Almost never.
Really?
Yeah, there's not a lot of standardization in the small business market.
So we're still got individual computers doing multiple different things, and may or may not even be hooked up to a server.
That's right.
Okay. And everybody individually hooked up to the internet?
Almost. Well, yes. Nowadays, everybody is. Yes, sir. And with multiple different types of connection devices. It could be tablets, mobile phones, which are basically tiny tablets now.
So typical of a small business owner, it's been patched together.
That's right. And several different vendors have been in and out of there over the years, and there's just not a lot of standardization. So what we find is when people are complaining about pain or drama associated with their IT, that's a great place for us to come in, because we're in the pain management business.
And so when you go in, is it because the owner has decided I can't do it like this anymore and I need some help?
Right.
And what percentage of owners are finally getting it?
I don't know an exact percentage. I don't know if I can answer that question, but I can tell you that all of my clients are falling in that category. They get it.
They're getting. I think there is a perception out there that they either have to get with it or move on to something else.
Right, with security associated with compliance requirements that are out there right now.
Right.
Yeah, it's something that this is not something that's recommended. When they say compliance, that means, the root word is comply. So you've got to do it.
Yeah.
Or face large fines.
Yeah. We had a session about that a couple of weeks ago. The whole security thing, and it's a little scary what
it is.
Hackers are up to these days.
I think that's the key driver of the growth that we're seeing in IT.
Is the security.
Yes, sir.
And you wanted me to ask you about the what are the, and I think you may have just answered it, but you can embellish on it, the key drivers of the growth in tech that's out there.
Right. Security would be my number one key driver, what would come to mind for me. Cloud being the second, migrating to the cloud in general. And then business continuity issues being the third, and that has to do with backup and disaster recovery.
Yeah, I in the banking world, IT is a major examination point of the feds,
right.
Of the bank examiners. So we've got to step on with technology.
Right.
But not every business is like that.
That's right.
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, did you have a part B to that question?
No.
Right. Compliance associated with data integrity for banking, medical, legal, what have you, is is something that the exposure is really hard to measure. There's a few examples out there, and I know you've heard about it, especially being in the banking industry, where data records have been lost, and then the exposure to the bank or the medical practice who loses the data is just astronomical.
It is, and the notice requirements are astronomical as well.
Just the notice requirement itself can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, and that's for a three doctor practice.
Wow.
With another maybe 15 additional staff, nursing and otherwise. Right, it's big. And then the second component is re-entering that data that was lost. It can be very expensive. The third component is when the government shows up, knocks on your door, and says, "Hey, we're from the federal government, and we're here to help you." You don't want to ever hear those words.
And they're looking at what, HIPAA violations and a lot of different things, right?
Right. Medical records are the hottest thing going on the dark web right now for sale.
So someone that's got a small business out there, and let's say they're operating, they got 20 desk locations. Everybody needs a computer. If they're listening to this, they probably need help. They don't know it.
Yes, sir.
But they're probably thinking, "Oh, it's just too expensive. I can't do it right now." But you could it's probably a cost saver, is it not?
That's right. If you look at what your potential downside is, I mean, how much money would you spend to save yourself $1 million liability?
Now, do you also help upgrade all the equipment, standardize all the software?
We do.
Okay.
We don't like to be necessarily in the hardware business because margins are so tight on that. Primarily, we want to be in the services business.
Sure.
But hardware is part of what we do.
And you'll get in and you'll look at the company and recommend in-house server, cloud, maybe a little bit of both, email server, access by handhelds, by tablets,
yes, sir.
Everything.
Yes, sir. And we do.
The doctor business, my doctor has a portal arrangement now, which I think is very effective. But from the consumer standpoint, I have no idea how she handles that portal.
Right.
So I'm assuming that they're all doing it right, but they may not be.
Right. You mean in terms of protecting your data?
Yeah. What what questions should the consumer ask? Should they worry about all that stuff?
Well, it depends on your medical practice that you're working with. An example that I know of for sure is Northside Hospital, for example.
Right.
They've got a team of something north of 200 IT professionals who are just
imagine.
working around the clock on their system for security. But I'm not sure exactly what kind of doctor you're talking about.
Well, let's just go, Roswell Internal Medicine, a shout out to them. They're a great group of doctors and very effective. And they've managed to provide this portal, which is extremely helpful. They're completely automated when you go in. But as a consumer, I feel like I've almost got the obligation to ask them, how do they back up all this stuff?
You should. You should ask them where that data is hosted. Is it in the cloud? Which means it's in a secure data center somewhere. It could be Albuquerque or Cleveland. You don't know and you don't care.
Right.
As long as you have access to it and as long as they have access to communicating with you through it. But yeah, you want to know. You want to know, is that data backed up and is it secure? Physically secure and digitally secure across the internet.
And on that note, cloud providers, I found out this week, are all different.
Yes, sir.
Their process, their procedures could be all different. For example, I understand that I've got stuff on a Google Drive, and I may delete it on my Google Drive, but it's still out there on the Google Drive.
Right. There'll be a digital footprint out there somewhere.
And where others, if you say you delete it, they'll tell you, yes, we get rid of it after a certain time period. I found that very interesting, that if you're backing up, say, in a legal business, and you're backing up all your information on a Google Drive, and you think you've got your customer protected, you may not.
Right. Yeah. And you you actually brought me to one of the areas that I did want to go because we were talking about before the show started about what mistakes we see out there.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
That is one of the big mistakes.
is we put too much faith in the cloud, don't we?
No, it's not so much that, but you put too much faith in the provider that's taking you to the cloud. They may be taking some shortcuts by doing what we call bare metal backup onto a Google Drive or Microsoft's OneDrive or something like that. It's just not smart. It's not the right way to do it.
And you, the business owner, have the obligation to follow that all the way through.
You better ask those questions. Yes, sir.
And the business owner probably doesn't know to ask those questions at this point.
No.
They think I'm just putting it on a server somewhere, and I'm sure Google will take care of it.
No, but if they're listening to this show, they can call you up.
Call you.
You can give them my phone number, and
right.
we can go from there.
That's why we do it. This is On the Money, brought to you by Embassy National Bank, and we're talking to Rick Higgins from Team Logic IT, and talking about different. He provides a off-site service management practice for small businesses to actually manage your software and your hardware for you and your entire tech environment. And as usual, we ended up talking about security when it comes to IT, and now we're talking about the cloud. And just sharing that this past week, I found out all cloud providers are different, and you, the small business owner, should ask the kind of questions of the cloud, your cloud provider. How do they back up data? How do they delete data? How safe is the data? Where is it located? All those types of questions.
That's right.
Because not necessarily a lot of these cloud providers may be backing stuff up in Russia. Maybe I've heard that's one of the questions. Find out physically where your data is being backed up.
Right. One of my most recent customers asked me the other day, he said, well, I know you said that my server is in the cloud, but where is it? And I knew where it was because I can look and see, and I started off the answer by saying, do you really care? And he said, well, when I think about it now, I really don't care. It turns out it is in Albuquerque. But next month it may be somewhere else.
Should I care?
I don't think you should. I mean, as long as you have access to it, it's readily available, and it's working and highly available.
And that company may make a decision to relocate it somewhere based on usage.
That's right.
They're responsible for making sure all that's protected.
Right.
So that's why it's important to understand the protection procedures of your cloud provider.
Right. When we take a customer to the cloud, we want the experience to be seamless, so that when they're logging into their system, which we call desktop as a service, they're always looking at the same desktop. It's always working, and it's the same whether they're looking at it from the beach on a laptop,
right,
from their tablet in the mountains, from their office on their desktop, or from home on a laptop. Doesn't matter. It should always look the same, and you've always got access to the same applications and the same data. Are you providing a lot of that where you're giving the owners access to their data anywhere, anytime? Yes, sir. Yep. That the desktop as a service cloud application, or cloud offering, as we put it, will always have the same data no matter what. No matter where you access it from, you're looking at the same desktop, and you're looking, because what happens, Joe, is the computing occurs on the server itself. Mm-hmm. The only thing going back and forth between the server and the local device is, are pixels. And so there's really no data going back and forth. The heavy lifting is occurring on the server, in the cloud, or in a data center, as the case is. And that's one of the things that makes it secure, is the only thing going back and forth are pixels. Now, what are you doing with voice? Are you trying to pull all that together for everybody in the same environment? We do that. We do provide phones and what we call hosted voice over IP solutions. Mm-hmm. And it does go across the same bandwidth that anything else does, either data or cloud services. And then you've got the ability to help them manage the phone system to find the right software, I guess. But their phone provider may also do that for them. Right. And if they do, we can help them manage that as well. if they're looking for a whole new phone system, we can come in with our solution and just replace it.
Okay. And I guess this goes without saying, but I guess you don't want to assume anything, but you really have to merge your voice and your IT all together.
There are cost savings to bundling that. There certainly are, yes, sir.
Okay.
Now, one of the things, though, is you got to watch out for is phones require bandwidth. So if you're cutting off a little bit of your internet bandwidth or capacity, you can damage services downstream or else, or vice versa. If you've got too much data going across your bandwidth, you can get spotty phone service. 10 years ago, voice over IP was very unpopular. The folks that migrated to it, a lot of them just decided, no, I'm not going to do this.
The quality was
switched.
awful.
And it had to do with bandwidth. And things have gotten better now because the required bandwidth is lower. The requirements are lower. And technology has, of course, addressed the issue in a lot of different ways. One way is partitioning bandwidth or dedicating a fixed amount of bandwidth to the phone system versus everything else that's going on in your computing environment.
Yeah, at the end of the day, when your phone call hits the distribution network, it's all IP anyway.
That's right.
So find a way to fix that up front, because there's no such thing as phone lines anymore, I guess.
Seems like it.
They're all T1 lines out there and fiber optic and everything else. Okay, well, let's and one other thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned in your particular franchise that you have owners who are focused more on business development and others that focus on as IT experts. So talk a little bit about that philosophy.
Those are, across our network, those are the two types of people that buy our franchises. The folks that come from a business development background and maybe have touched technology like myself, and then the folks who have a deep technology background but are not too savvy in the sales and business development arena. So we've got almost a 50-50 mix across our 100 franchises nationwide.
But the franchise is not different. It's just who owns it.
That's right.
So now, do you have a good sharing between all the franchisees?
It's unbelievably good and unbelievably powerful at TeamLogic IT. And I really did a lot of looking and talking to the owners themselves across the country and here locally as well. And I was amazed with how willing everybody was, to a person, willing to open up the kimono and say, hey, this is what I was doing in my 6th month. This is what I was doing in my 12th month. This is where I got to break even, and this is where I got to profitability. This is what I'm doing right now. I'm 36 months in right now, and this is where I am, and this is what I'm doing net profit-wise. So I was really, really impressed with that.
Now, what about help with the client?
Help with the client, and that comes, of course, after you buy the franchise and start up, because by that time you don't have the financial questions so much. You've got the technical issues.
Right.
And that as helpful as the franchisees were to me, my sister companies were to me beforehand, they've been 10 times as more helpful to me after the fact.
So it's just not you. You got a whole team behind you.
That's right. We've thousands of techs nationwide across, again, 100 outlets. And we're growing like crazy.
100 outlets. When did TeamLogic start?
11 years ago.
Where?
Oh, excuse me. Southern California, Mission Viejo.
Okay.
Right, and it's part of the Franchise Services International Corporation, which also owns and manages the Sir Speedies printing business.
Yeah. Okay.
And also KOA, Campgrounds of America, is part of that network. Yeah.
Well, let's there's a second part of this that I wanted to get into a little bit, and because there's a lot of folks out there who are looking to get into different kinds of businesses. So I know you've had that experience, because before the show started, you indicated that you've got a software consulting background, but then you moved into commercial real estate appraisals.
Right.
And then from there, you started digging around to figure out what franchise you wanted to buy, because you wanted to start your own business.
Right.
And you didn't necessarily start looking at IT. Talk about that whole, I want to go into my own business. Talk through that whole thought process.
Well, the latest change for me happened when it started with going on a summer walk with my wife in June, and I was complaining about how things were going in the commercial real estate industry in general and the appraisal part of the industry specifically. And she said, Rick, you've never been a whiner or complainer. I don't want to hear it anymore. Why don't you do something about it? Shut up and do something about it.
There you
and
go.
I'll tell you
I've heard that before.
well, then you're a lucky man, because I'll tell you what, I thank the good Lord above every day for her, because, I mean, that was a turning point for me. Of course, I was so agitated by it, First I was angry, and then I was like, well, guess what? She's right.
Mm-hmm.
Stayed up all night that night doing research, worked on it for weeks on end, doing research, looked into several different verticals, not just IT. I was also interested in energy, which was kind of a natural extension from my engineering background. And then and I looked into solar specifically in energy. So kept coming back to IT because of what I would call hypergrowth that we're experiencing right now in this country and worldwide.
Because there are a lot of people that really need to catch up, aren't there?
With IT, yes, sir. Yeah, there's a lot of catch up to do, and there's a lot of demand, and there's a lot of competition out there.
Sure.
So folks are jumping into it.
Now, interesting, you started on the energy front. What did you find on the energy front?
Well, there was two franchises that I was looking at. One was in the solar industry specifically. What I found with that is that the value proposition for solar in Georgia is just not there yet, like it is compared to other states around the country. Has to do with state tax incentives and federal tax incentives.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's the solar. Right now, solar is a good objective to try to get to, but the only reason it's workable is because of government subsidy, correct?
Right. Well, yes and no.
Yes and
okay.
no.
Here's the yes and no of it. It's still workable here.
Yeah.
But the payback tends to push out between 6 and 8 years.
Okay.
Now, to me, that's workable. When you're talking about making a capital investment in your house, 6 or 8 year payback, I'll do that deal.
Right.
But
may make your house more sellable.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And there may be payback in that too. You may be able to realize all of the capital cost back in a sale. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. But the states where they are realizing and benefiting from tax rebates that are associated with the state and or the county or city municipality, those paybacks can actually be under 2 years. And all of the financing companies that are working with the in the solar space don't even want to come in and play in states that don't have paybacks down at the bottom end of the time spectrum.
And we could probably spend a whole show on solar energy, but I guess I understand there are two types of solar energy, and one works better than the other. It has to do with the capture and use of the solar energy down the road versus if you don't use it, then you lose it, kind of thing. But I'm sure the engineers will figure all that out.
Yep. And the second type of franchise that I looked at was just energy in general, and it had to do with consulting and sale of a specific series of product lines associated with reducing energy costs, specifically in the industrial market.
Well, why didn't you go down to New Mexico and spend $1 billion and build a factory farm? I mean, a battery farm.
I only had $900 million. I didn't have the $1 billion.
We were sure didn't have enough for working capital.
No, I didn't have it.
All right, so you start digging around, and what made you choose Team Logic?
Well, I settled in on IT in general. That's how I started. I'm not going to name the other franchise that I was looking at, but it's very similar in terms of product offerings and business planning. What made me pick Team Logic over the other one was that we take about half of the upfront franchise fee and reinvest it into every new territory for the initial marketing campaign, first 90 or 100 days. Direct mail, Google AdWords, and a national call center that's making calls into our targeted initial territory.
And so you're happy with it so far?
Very happy. I've never been happier with my work.
Good. Working, that's always good to hear. On a financial standpoint, I guess over the years, you had enough money to save up to do this?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's a pretty heavy duty capital rock to lift, but my wife and I together done really well saving, and so we were able to do it.
Well, and we talked about that a couple of weeks ago about how if you never know when you're going to be faced with a career change, and
Right.
it's you need to financially stay flexible for those kinds of things so that you don't get wedded to the job, so to speak, where
That's
you
right.
can't make that change.
That's right. And for me, I wanted to do something that was scalable,
Mm-hmm.
that ultimately I could scale it up to where it was something other for me than owning a job.
Sure.
And that's the way in the appraisal practice. All I could figure was, 3 years in, 5 years in, and 7 years down the road, I was still going to just own my job. I couldn't, walk away from it and have the
Well, you had to put in the time in order to get paid,
right.
where a lot of folks need to find the business to where they make that initial investment, but at some point they can let other people and do the work, and you can leverage that.
That's right. And therein lies the biggest challenge too of starting and growing any practice that's scalable is getting work done through other people.
Right.
It's been my biggest challenge.
Right.
I think any business owner sitting at this table would tell you the same thing.
Well, you're absolutely right, because typically you get into something because you're really good at it,
Right.
but yet you may not know how to run a business,
Right.
and they're two different things. So you've got to spend the first year or so probably getting it cranked up, but then you got to back away and run the business,
Yeah.
which is a whole different mindset and a whole different set of talents. So where do you see this particular your business going, say 5, 6 years, 7 years from now?
Well, I don't know if I can look out that far, but I'll try. I'll tell you, this time next year, I want to have about between 5 and 7 people, be about that size. And then, 5 to 7 years from now, I want to be 30, 40, 50 people.
Now, are you going to focus more on the sales side or on the technical side?
I am, but on going to focus on the sales side because that's what I'm good at. I want to hire the folks for the nitty gritty technical work of what we do, and manage them to the extent I'm able. But no, I gotta focus on business development because that's really my thing.
So once you get the contract, then you call another franchisee and come over here. I need to introduce you so you can run with this.
No, I'm doing it myself.
Okay.
I mean, if I sell a contract, you're going to see either Rick Higgins or one of Rick Higgins' employees.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if we need to scale up for a large project, I can call in my
Whatever
the
you
techs
need
from
to
my
do.
sister company. They'll physically show up, or they're a resource remotely for
Okay.
me.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. A lot of people out there are thinking about starting their own business, and you hit on all the elements that you did right that a lot of people don't do. One is you got to save up your nickels beforehand so you can afford to do all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You got to do a lot of homework, and you picked an area that you were familiar with, but you weren't necessarily an expert in.
Kind of dabbled in it over the years, and was always curious.
And then you're going to focus more on the sales side, which is what you're good at. So you
Right.
found something that allows you to build to your strength.
Yep.
And then ultimately you do know, and you've communicated that you're going to have to just be able to sit back and run the business and let other people take off with it.
Right. I want to get it to that point ultimately.
Yeah.
We do have owners within our network who are what I'd call an absentee owner.
Mm-hmm.
They rather focus on Christian ministry or something else, and so they've turned it over to a full-time manager, and then they see them quarterly and collect a check.
Well, Rick, it's been a good talk. I can't believe we're here to the end of it, but tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Phone number for me is 770-847-9611.
And website?
TeamLogicIT /DunwoodyGA.
Okay. And you do have a Twitter, I guess, right? At Team Logic IT?
I don't know about Twitter. Okay,
Yeah,
there you go.
yeah.
Team Logic IT. You can find us on Twitter for
Okay.
sure.
Well, good. Well, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be here.
And small business owners, the IT is not something you just want to put on the back step and wait till you don't have time. You're going to have to spend money on it. You're going to have to embrace it. You're going to have to do it right. And I know people have been saying this for 15, 20 years, but it really needs to start happening. And you got to own it, step up to it, and be smart about it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, listen, that's our show for today. This has been On the Money, the _1 small business show on Business Radio X. On the Money is presented by Embassy National Bank. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at @on_the_money and then the _1. You can also listen to our shows by visiting onthemoney.businessradiox.com and download our shows on iTunes or listen to them right there off that website. And then the other piece that we're now doing is going to the Business Radio X Gwinnett YouTube channel, and you can actually watch a video of today's show. And I found that to be quite useful, as a matter of fact. So, as usual, it's been fun. This is Joe Moss with Embassy National Bank. Remember, be careful out there. Leave fear in the back seat. Stay authentic. And our producer is counting them. Safeguard your data. And there's one more. Don't ever lose your sense of humor. Have fun with all this stuff because it can drive you crazy if you don't. So thanks, and we'll see you next time.